What's up, folks? I'm Chris, your NFL writer here at Occupy Fantasy, here with another look at how to attack 12-man best ball leagues in these high-risk tournaments on Underdog Fantasy. Today, we're going to be looking at the best way to attack drafting from the 7th, 8th, and 9th starting positions in Best Ball Mania 4. Looking at the ADP over the last several days, we've had a little bit of movement in the first round consensus. As of today, which is June 15th, the consensus number 7 overall pick is Stefon Diggs from the Buffalo Bills, so we'll take a look at building a roster around him. From the 8-hole, A.J. Brown of the Philadelphia Eagles is the consensus pick, and at the 9th position, the starting running back for the Los Angeles Chargers, Austin Eckler, is the consensus number 9 pick. We also have the best ball stack seeker available on OccupyFantasy.com in addition to the ADP tracker. And that will be the best way to look at what we should do behind Stefon Diggs at the number 7 overall pick. Now, in this build, I am forecasting Josh Allen as the second round pick because I don't think it's very likely he'll make it back to you at pick 31 in the third round, but obviously you will be rewarded for being patient and waiting for Allen in the third round if you can. From a high upside perspective, I do like getting Allen and Diggs and just locking it up here in the first and second round. So when we do that, we have to take a look at who the Bills will be facing in the fantasy playoffs this year. They will be facing the New England Patriots in championship week, week 17. The other opponents for Buffalo are the Dallas Cowboys in week 15 and the Los Angeles Chargers in week 16. You'll notice this build starts in the first half of the draft as pretty running back light. The first running back I am selecting here is Breece Hall from the New York Jets, right at ADP here at pick 31 in the third round. There's no direct correlation with the Buffalo Bills in the fantasy playoffs, but we will have 2 games during the season that the Bills and the Jets face each other as division rivals. So hopefully we are invested in some high-scoring environments in those weeks with an Allen, Diggs, Hall start to our team. But there is, if we look at the spider web of correlation, a little bit of correlation between Breece Hall and some Bills opponents in the playoff slate. Buffalo, we're going over to the best ball stack seeker, has the Dallas Cowboys in week 15. And looking at the Dallas Cowboys have the Miami Dolphins in week 16. And Miami is where we find our Breece Hall correlation in the playoffs because the Dolphins play the Jets in week 15. So the way this roster has come together, it would be advantageous for me to find a Miami Dolphin player in the second half of the draft here, which I have not mapped out, but the best options are any of the 3 running backs that can be selected in fantasy football this year, or in the 18th round, one of their tight ends and one of their tertiary wide receivers would also be available if we choose to go that direction. The 4th round, Mike Williams of the Los Angeles Chargers, more likely to be here than Keenan Allen because Keenan Allen goes a little bit ahead of pick 42, around pick 37, 38. If Keenan Allen falls, I think I do prefer him to Mike Williams, but getting Williams here in the 4th round allows for correlation with the Buffalo Bills in the semifinals week. So now we have that locked down, and then we can get Juju Smith-Schuster in the 9th round for the Week 17 correlation with the Patriots. Ramondre Stevenson will be the ideal target for Patriots Week 17 game stacks at the 3rd round slot, but he's not likely to be there. His ADP is around pick 27 at this point. Now, if I were to start a draft this way, when the board comes back to me around pick 55 in the 5th round, there's no direct correlation with the Seattle Seahawks in this start, but JSN, Jackson Smith-Njigba, the rookie draft pick for the Seattle Seahawks in the 1st round this past spring, is a very high upside wide receiver, drafted pretty closely to Tyler Lockett, and there's correlation with the Pittsburgh Steelers in week 17. Seattle plays Pittsburgh in that championship week of the season. So I do like getting JSN and Deontay Johnson here back to back. That would be a good ideal start for more week 17 correlation in addition to the players ahead of them on this roster. finally, an opportunity in the 7th round, I think, to lock in Brandon Cooks and get that Dallas Cowboys correlation with Buffalo in week 15. If we miss on Juju because his ADP has been rising, we should be able to get a cheap New England tight end late, either Mike Gesicki or Hunter Henry, or one of the biggest risers in the ADP tracker over the last week. Tyquan Thornton with the New England Patriots, a consensus 14th round pick, would be another option for your week 17 correlation with a Buffalo Bills stack around Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen. I am interested in Bills without Allen here and building around Diggs. There's a lot of wide receivers that we can correlate with that we're interested in out of this slot. Obviously, Justin Herbert, Geno Smith, Kenny Pickett, Dak Prescott, and even Mac Jones all correlate with other assets I was interested in from this slot. So you don't have to lock in Josh Allen in the 2nd round. It is obviously a little ahead of his ADP. But I do think if we are banking on Stephon Diggs being a top asset in fantasy football, obviously he'll be carried by Josh Allen. And that means we want to be invested in this Bills offense altogether. So I don't mind starting this way one bit. From the 8th pick, same idea with Jalen Hurts. A little ahead of ADP in the 2nd round, but I love locking down the Brown-Hurts stack in my lineups with A.J. Brown. Philadelphia's correlations are extremely different than some of the correlations I've talked about in any of the videos in this series so far. They've got the Arizona Cardinals in week 17, the New York Giants in week 16, and the Seattle Seahawks in week 15. So that means in the 5th round, I'm going to be interested in those Seattle wide receivers, Lockett or JSN. Darren Waller right around pick 80 should stand out to me as someone I should be prioritizing, or Saquon in like the 2nd, 3rd round. And then the Arizona Cardinals, we've got options like Marquise Brown in the 5th round and James Conner around pick 80. It's sort of where my head goes once I select A.J. Brown onto my roster. And going back over to the ideal start from the 8th pick that I've built out, you notice that these are the players that I have somewhat considered here. I decided to go a different direction than Waller and go with James Conner in round 7 for this particular build. But another way to attack this would be with Marquise Brown a little earlier in the draft, going away from James Conner, having Darren Waller as my tight end, and then drafting a completely different player here in round 6 other than Dallas Goedert. Like the double stack here with Jalen Hurts, Dallas Goedert, and A.J. Brown. I feel like that means I get my starter at tight end locked down and do not necessarily think it's wise to go double tight end early with Goddard and Waller, although it would be kind of interesting to play around with some of those combinations if you're building a lot of lineups. So JSN in the 5th round gets my week 15 correlation with the Eagles locked down. I'd still be looking for some late correlation with the New York Giants. I think the wide receiver I'm most interested in at this point would be Paris Campbell in the slot. Paris Campbell with some praise from the athletic writer Dan Duggan from OTAs as probably having the inside track to the slot role and being, I think the context of the question was which wide receiver on the Giants roster is the closest thing to being the next Richie James Jr. for the Giants. Richie James had a good season for the Giants last year. Paris Campbell was cited as the most likely asset. Doesn't mean it's going to work out that way, but Paris Campbell would be the wide receiver I would be looking to grab late to grab my Giants correlation here. And James Conner, who I think is just being drafted way too low, given what we think his role should be in fantasy football this year for the Arizona Cardinals. Because we have correlation with the Seattle Seahawks in week 15 on this roster, and I'm prioritizing a wide receiver from the Seahawks to get that with the Eagles, that means that whether it's JSN, Tyler Lockett, that means that I now have a week 17 correlation with the Steelers that I can leverage by virtue of getting a Seattle player on this roster. And knowing that that's what I intend to do when I start this way, I'm happy to take Najee Harris first in the 3rd round, anticipating my Seattle correlation in the 5th round. So that's where those 2 picks come from in this particular build. Not super passionate about the player here in round 4, but I feel the way that this roster comes together, you want to get another wide receiver here in the 4th round. And Jerry Jeudy stands out to me as the most likely best player to be available at this spot. So I like going Jeudy there for that reason. Some other options that are likely to be available, Drake London with the Atlanta Falcons, Mike Williams, who I like from the 7 hole, and Terry McLaurin from the Washington Commanders, who I also like quite a bit. This would be a good spot to consider them. I would view this more as just best wide receiver available to keep maximizing high upside at an extremely important position from pick 8. The 9th pick, and Austin Eckler of the Los Angeles Chargers. I expanded the board quite a bit here to show what I think I would try to do if I got Austin Ekeler. One thing that you can do with Ekeler, treat him more like a wide receiver who also runs the football occasionally. You could try to target Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Justin Herbert, and get that Charger stack. Chargers play the Denver Broncos in Week 17, so there's options for run backs with Courtland Sutton late, Jerry Jeudy early, who obviously I like. For this particular build, I think what makes sense, what I would try to do, I haven't had the opportunity to select Ekeler in my portfolio that I'm putting together yet, but I think my first inclination would be to use him as the standalone best play on the Chargers at his cost and stack the Denver Broncos on the other side. So with that in mind, we see that the Chargers play the Raiders, the Bills, and the Broncos in the playoff slate of games this season. Bringing Denver into the fold, since I intend to stack them, Denver has the Lions, the Patriots, and of course the Chargers in their playoff slate of weeks. In the second round, Chris Olave is likely to be the highest upside wide receiver that is still on the board for me out of this hole. That's why I've locked him in there. No direct correlation with either of these teams here, but if we bring the New Orleans Saints into the picture, we can see we have other options we can now consider throughout the rest of this draft. Primarily the Bucs in Week 17 correlating with the Saints, New York Giants Week 15, Rams in Week 16. In the third round, I'd be very interested in Jahmyr Gibbs in this build because of the Week 15 correlation with the Denver Broncos. So get that out of the way early before beginning my Broncos stack. And then when it comes back to me selecting Jerry Jeudy, wide receiver 1 for the Denver Broncos, well on the way to getting Denver correlated in each of Week 15, 16, and 17 once we do this. Not a direct correlation for Sanders with the rest of this team, but sort of a best running back available selection in the 5th round around pick 57. Other options that could be here, J.K. Dobbins if he falls a little bit, Alexander Mattison from the Minnesota Vikings, Dameon Pierce from the Houston Texans. Other directions you could go at the running back position in this spot, because when I build this way, I am intending to slam these 3 wide receivers if I can get them in rounds 6, 7, and 8. Mike Evans in the 6th round at pick 64 correlates with Chris Olave. The Saints play the Buccaneers in championship week. The Dallas Cowboys and Brandon Cooks at pick 81, basically right at ADP. His ADP is 82.5 right now. The Cowboys have a Week 17 matchup with the Detroit Lions, which is something I'll talk about more in next week's video when we pick from pick 11 and get CeeDee Lamb. I love getting any correlation I can from that game in the second half of drafts. Courtland Sutton, a little ahead of ADP in the 8th round, and then waiting for Russell Wilson to come around to me in the double-digit rounds to complete my high upside 3-1 stack of Chargers Broncos. The only thing missing for me from this roster with the Denver Broncos is a semifinals week 16 correlation with the New England Patriots. In the 14th round, which I did not do on this particular build that I mapped out, you could consider Tyquan Thornton, who is the biggest riser at the wide receiver position in the ADP tracker on AccurateFantasy.com. Had a really strong set of OTAs for the New England Patriots, a lot of camp buzz around Tyquan Thornton, so you could go that route. The route that I chose to take here was Mike Gesicki very late as a tight end for the New England Patriots in the 16th round, a little ahead of his ADP. If you miss on Gesicki, you have the opportunity in round 17 or 18 to consider the other tight end for the Patriots, Hunter Henry. I think this is the best way to build around Austin Ekeler. There's more than one way to do it. We're just trying to maximize correlation and upside in these contests and hope that we can sneak a few teams through to the finals and have a sweat for that $3 million first place prize in Best Ball Mania 4. If you're new to Best Ball, and particularly Best Ball through Underdog Fantasy, you can sign up for a new account today through our link below in the description of this video. Promo code OCCUPY1 when you sign up. That'll get you an additional 100% match on your first deposit up to $100. That means if you deposit $100, Underdog will give you an additional $100, so you can start playing with $200 here on Underdog Fantasy right away. Get into some of these contests. Utilize some of the strategies that we're talking about here to correlate lineups and have a real chance at a sweat for a big prize this January. Thank you for watching this video. I will be back next week with the final video in this series, a look at how to attack the 10th 11th, and 12th slot assignments in best ball drafts on Underdog Fantasy. Hope you've enjoyed this series. Hope you'll catch the final edition next week. Thank you for watching this video. We will talk to you soon.